Welcome to Adobe APAC Live. I'm Michael Stoddart, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Melissa So to Adobe APAC Live. Melissa, welcome.
Thank you.
Melissa, you're a graphic designer by trade,
Yes.
but a letterer, a calligrapher, a typographer, a typesetter.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to here.
So I was classically trained as a graphic designer, but my work these days focuses primarily on lettering and a bit of calligraphy. So it's a lot of like alphabet focused. I've studied in New York. I was accepted into the Typography Cooper program. 16 people are accepted internationally per year. So I was really happy to be one of those people selected. During my time there, it was a 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. type immersive structure. So in the morning we'd practice calligraphy, afternoons study type history, draw letters throughout the evening, and then take it into our font making programs to design letters. And on weekends in New York, we got to visit old museums, study old calligraphy manuscripts, and also go to the street level and look at all the old signages that were around in Brooklyn. So it was a real education.
That sounds like spectacular opportunity, especially 1 out of 16. So that's worldwide, I take it as well.
Yeah.
And just expand on that for a little minute about being immersed. Is there a big type culture in New York? And
they have a
informed you?
very rich history. So I suggest anybody travel to any place in the world and really just see what the shop signages look like, see how they treat their type. I think wherever you visit, there's a different flavour.
Yeah, so we're going to start with some of the work that you've done here, one of which we can see on screen, which is your Break Free piece. Tell us about this, and that looks like a rather large piece of work.
This was a mural done at Central Park Mall here in Sydney. The wall itself is about 10 metres by 3 metres tall, so it's quite big. Central Park have a history of working with street artists, so they were quite comfortable with letting me really have some creative license. When I went in there, I wanted to create a piece that looked like it took a long time to do. So what I did here was to draw letterforms, and then I went around the letterforms with a wooden dowel and some paint, and I just dotted each one by hand. So the whole process was about 13 hours in total. I listened to a lot of podcasts, but it was really rewarding in the end.
Let me just confirm that is actually done by hand in situ.
Yes.
Directly
so
I
had a little sketch to kind of give me a guide, but then I just freehanded most of it.
And could you give us a sense of the size of that? I imagine that's quite large.
It's about 10 or 11 metres wide by 3 metres tall. So if I stood next to it, I'd probably come halfway up that. Yeah.
Right, pretty spectacular. There's another piece that I want to talk about, which is your beast mode. Again, probably not as large, but still highly impressive piece of work. Tell us about this one.
So this one was more calligraphy based. Instead of creating something that was very complex, I approached this to transpose the grittiness of calligraphy directly onto a wall. So I used an old sign writing technique of using a carbon transfer that pushes graphite from the back of the stencil onto the actual wall. And then I filled it in because I wanted to look pretty much exactly like someone got a really big ruling pen and just wrote letters onto this wall.
Right, so that's a one-to-one process. You would have had to have the print, obviously, as large as that.
It was a very, very big print.
Yeah.
I had to tape a lot of pieces of paper together.
Well, I know you're going to work us through today in today's session with some of your craft. But before we do that, I just wanted to remind everybody we are running a competition. We want you to be able to have a go at this yourself. The prize for the competition is, of course, a signed print from Melissa, signed letterpress print, even better. Melissa's provided a template.
Yes.
What is that?
So for anyone who wants to learn about hand lettering or give it a go themselves, I've created a template which you can use one of two ways. You can print it out and put a piece of tracing paper and just mimic the brushstrokes as I've laid them out, or you can even import them into Photoshop or Adobe Sketch and use some brushes with the pressure sensitivity turned on to replicate it digitally.
Okay, so that's the competition we're running. As I said, try it out, use Melissa's template that she's provided, upload it to Behance using the hashtag Adobe APAC Live, You have till next Wednesday to get that up on Behance. We'll be judging that, and we will be announcing the winner at the next APAC Live. We will, at the end of today's session, be announcing the winner from last session that Jeremy Lord did. So hang around for that, and you'll be hearing from them.
And with the template, I suggest people play around with Kyle T. Webster's brushes, because he's designed brushes that mimic real brush strokes. So they just have a play around, experiment, learn the rules.
Okay, and I believe the link to Kyle's brushes will be on screen, or if not now, certainly soon will be. Before we jump into it, I just did want to take an opportunity to ask you about your style. It's quite unique, and how you came. I know you do a lot of different work, but how did you come to settle on this particular type of work?
So I love lettering because the alphabet, as we know it, is written in a certain way. So we understand the letter lowercase h to be a vertical stroke with an arch. So as a creative, an artist or a designer, we can put in a lot of our own influences onto this skeleton. And so at the end of the day, we'll have a piece of artwork that's in our own style, but then can also be read to the greater audience. And I think that's something really unique.
Yes, it's an interesting point you make, that we all write, but very few of us take that leap to where you are, where that act of writing is actually a creative expression.
Yeah, and I tend to be a bit of an introvert, so lettering is my extroverted side to come out. So most of my phrases are a little bit sassy, a little bit egotistical, and that's where I channel my my energy.
So if we're looking at your work, it's not only how it looks, but what it's saying is part of your design ethos as well. Okay, that's terrific. Well, one of the things that I know I wanted to ask you about was the differences. I introduced you as a graphic designer, but also calligraphy, typesetting. There's a lot of different terminology. What's the difference between these?
Yeah, so a lot of these terms get mixed up and used interchangeably. I tried to make a distinction because each one is a craft on its own. So in the simplest terms, calligraphy is the art of writing, and lettering is the art of illustrating letters. Hand lettering can also imply that it's made out of multiple strokes. Type design is a system of fonts and glyphs that work together. A family of fonts is called a typeface, and typography is the art of arranging type. So think about using composition and typesetting to create a beautiful layout. Right.
Okay. So it's quite a range there from a designer type of expression to quite a mathematical program type of thing. Okay. So we have a chat pod, as you can see on screen, and this is a great opportunity for you to ask Melissa questions directly, and Melissa will respond to you throughout the course of the session.
Or just say hi.
Just to say hello. We do have one here from Jason, who's told, actually it's from Marie. Marie has asked, do you have a Kyle Webster brush favourite? You mentioned Kyle Webster's brushes. Yep. Is there one you like, or you would recommend people getting into?
I think he has a set of calligraphy brushes that mimic the brushstrokes of calligraphy nibs, and I enjoy the expansion contrast that it has. So it has a very fine tip, and then it kind of widens out as a calligraphy nib would.
So recommend starting with that to get a good result?
Yeah, that will give you a nice result.
Oh, terrific. Well, let's dive into it. You've got a lot to show us today. Where do you start?
So today I'll be showing you how I use traditional methods along with digital apps like Creative Cloud, and how that can be integrated through various stages of my work and your work for different purposes. So with my lettering, I first like to start out with pen and paper.
So again, still starting with analog.
Yeah, so this is a traditional method that I'm quite comfortable with. If you're comfortable with starting out digitally, by all means go for it, but I personally like using a pen tool, and I like the tactile nature of the paper.
You've got a lot of them, I see over there. Some of them from way in my past.
Yes. So my favourite method to start with is usually ink with a writing tool, and a writing tool can be anything from a paintbrush, a brush pen, calligraphy nibs, or even folded.
And is that a ruling pen?
Yeah, yes. They're super cool, and they give you like that really nice gritty texture that you can see behind me in Beast Mode.
And so they are still used, ruling pens, pen and nib?
Yeah. I mean, you can't really control how ink splatters, and I enjoy the uncertainty of that. But today we'll be starting with the humble brush pen because it's neat and we don't want to create a mess.
Terrific.
So, yep. so this is a brush pen with a sponge tip. It's tapered, and we're going to work with this to create the correct thick and thin lines. So I like to start off with drawing a light pencil skeleton to help me guide where my letters are going to be. So I start with holding the pen at a 45-degree angle, pushing firmly on the downward strokes, and then lightly on the upward strokes. So light pressure on upward, firm pressure on the downward.
So that's, your control is quite impressive. How long does it take to get that confident with?
I'm going to be honest, it took me a while to gain the confidence, but this is where practice really comes in because it's all about muscle memory, and your writing tool really becomes an extension of yourself. So the more confident you are, that's going to translate in how it looks. So that's kind of what I have there. I'll do this usually a couple of times. Actually borders on like a little bit of an obsessive territory because I'll be just writing the same thing over and over again, but then making minor adjustments. So
how many would you do for something like this?
Like 50. I joke that I'm a professional paper waster, but I'm super on top of my recycling, I swear. So the iterations could be trying on a different writing surface. So like tracing paper will usually give you a smoother result, whereas bond paper tends to suck up all the ink, so you get this really nice kind of dry brush texture. Okay. So I might play with flourishes or the spacing or like the actual letters, trying like tweaking the design of it.
All right. Well, before you move on, got a question here from Andersik. When did you start doing graphic design? And another one from Janelle. What's your favourite nylon brush pen? So when did you start doing graphic design, and what's your favourite brush pen?
I think this is going to show my age. I think I started in 2005 and wrapped up in 2008.
Right.
And my favourite brush pen to use is the Tombow. It's got a really nice springiness, and it's really easy to use. It's just got this really pointed tip. But some other favourites here, I've got a Sharpie brush pen. So as you can see, a pointed tip. And this is just like a smaller zebra version of that. But once you start practicing writing, you'll kind of understand which pen really.
So I believe now you go from analog, move into digital.
Yeah, that's right. So at this stage we'll move on to Photoshop, where I will use a program to refine what I've done. So I've scanned in my favorite iterations. If we look on screen here, I'm really happy with how most of the letterforms work, but I'm not quite happy with this B here. So on another version that I've scanned in, you can see this capital B has a better relationship with the R here. So I want to migrate this B over to this other layer. I don't believe that you need to throw away 95% of your work if you need to just tweak a little bit of it.
And on passing, how do you get them in there? Do you just scan them on a flatbed?
Yeah, I scan them on a flatbed. I personally like to capture a lot of the texture, so I like to scan it in at like a higher DPI than what I output as. So we'll just use the lasso tool, roughly draw around the letter form, and then just drag it onto our layer here and just position it.
And so Nelson asks, do you have any influence or preference with Asian brushes and sumi-e type of drawing?
Oh, that's a good question. I have tried using. I do like sumi because it's got a lot of carbon in it, and it gives a really nice, deep, dark ink. But then you might lose a bit of texture when you do that. I think the zebra brush is an Asian brush, but I tend to prefer to use the Tombow. Like I'm not too caught up in it. It's just whether that brush applies to what I need it to do.
Yeah.
So here I'm tweaking. I've just dragged the bead that I preferred onto the actual artwork that I like. Another way that I like to use Photoshop to refine what I've done is to use the liquify tool. So
that's permissible. You can use
just a little. I like to use it sparingly because if you use it too much, you really destroy the integrity of your original artwork. So for example, this R here, the tail of it's looking a little bit straight, and I just want to add a little bit of a curve to it. So I'll select the layer that I need, go in with the lasso tool, and isolate that letter alone. And the shortcut to accessing the liquify filter is Command-Shift-X on a Mac.
That'd be Control-Shift-X
Yep.
on PC?
That's correct. So as you can see, once we have this filter up, all the red areas are frozen, so we can't accidentally, push or smudge our artwork. Because I like to make subtle changes, I'll use a big medium brush with a medium pressure. So I'll just very slightly push a curve. So as you can see, it's just quite subtle. I don't want to do too much to it.
Yeah, so you use Photoshop, all the standard tools that we see with image retouching, but you're using them in a very much graphic design way.
Yes, so we have the tools to really give us a polished finish to our work, so you use it to your advantage, I say.
Right.
Yep.
For those of you who just joined us, we're here with Melissa So, and she's taking us through calligraphy and typography and lettering. Just want to reiterate that we have a competition running. Melissa has provided a template for you to work on. Download it and upload your results to Behance using the hashtag Adobe APAC Live. Just while you're working on there, Melissa, we had another question from Andesic. Do you find drawing by hand or digital easier? And this was a question I had. You drew your letterforms on paper. Do you draw digitally? And Andesic's question is hand or digital, which is easier?
I'm hand biased, but then I like to use digital to refine it. Right. So I learnt using pen and paper, so that to me is quite natural.
Right. Terrific. All right, I'll let you keep going.
So as you can see where I've imported this bee, and it's not quite matching up to the rest of the artwork, and we can adjust the whites and the black using the levels and the adjustment panel as an adjustment layer. So it'll bring up this slider here, and we'll just push the whites so they're quite, for a bit more clarity. Right.
While you're doing that, Gillian has just asked, transferring your lettering into large-scale murals. We can hold that to the end because I know you want to get onto that.
Yeah.
So thanks for the question, but we'll hold that when we get to how Melissa does transfer it to those large walls. And from Rhett, do you think that your natural handwriting needs to be neat to begin with?
Oh, absolutely not. My handwriting is terrible. It looks like I'm like the handwriting of a serial killer. Okay. I channel all my energy into perfecting line widths and stroke widths and just keep it there.
So it's interesting. You do see there's a definite difference between handwriting and calligraphy.
Yeah, it's a lot more considered.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So my handwriting is just
Okay. All right.
So back onto the adjustment layers here. I like to use adjustment layers because I like to work non-destructively. So if we want to go back to our original artwork, we can make changes to that quite easily. So using this layer slider, you can make it quite solid by pushing the sliders around. Or if you like a bit more texture, you can bring it back down, so as you can see. So we might want to colour our artwork using the same method, using adjustment layers. So leave a comment in the chat box if you wanted to see a certain colour.
Definitely. Chat box, quick. Pick 2 colours. Anybody. While you're doing that, Mari B asks, when did your interest in lettering start?
So I was TAFE educated, and in that last year we had a typography mural module, and that's where I first became interested. So I actually had to think about layouts on a page and composition, and then we had a module for font making. So that's when I had to think about glyphs and letterforms as an entire group, and I was like, oh, this is really an artwork within itself. So it kind of branched off from typography to lettering and type design.
Right, so it came out of...
It was like a natural progression.
Okay, thanks.
Do you have a colour?
We have plenty of colours.
Ooh.
Blue, green and teal.
Teal. Teal is a great colour because my letterpress print is actually that colour.
Yes.
So here I like to use a gradient map adjustment layer because my work is usually very black and white. It's really easy to use the gradient map to switch around and pick up those pixels. So what was it? Teal.
Teal and blue-green. Janelle asks, do you use many hair or nylon bristled brush pens like the Pentel pocket brush pens?
Yes, I do. I do. They're really handy when you're on the go because they're self-inking, but otherwise I do like to use paintbrushes just dipped into some sumi ink as well, and that gives you like a nice splatter because otherwise I've had this where the pen has exploded on me before because I've like tried to pump out too much ink at once.
So this is an interesting technique you have here. Because your artwork is black and white, you're actually applying that gradient style over the top of it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I've just used the teal colour and the white, and you can like click on reverse and that really easily changes it up for you. And then if you wanted to add more texture, you can go back into levels and play with the slider again. So it could be like
right. So just to recap there, you're adding the gradient style and you're just clicking on the gradient to bring up, and you just pick two colours, one or two. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you can go back in here and just play with the colours to your heart's content.
It's a great technique.
And then you maintain all the integrity of your other layers. So if you wanted to create an alpha layer and then give it to like your client as just the letterforms itself, I like to go to the channels palette and just turn off all this so it's just black and white, and select all the pixels from the RGB channel, and it will bring up the marching ants.
Yes.
Inverse it by Command-Shift-I and just paste your pixels.
Right.
And that's how you would...
Nicely done.
Yeah.
So one question moving on there is, we're in Photoshop, which is obviously bitmap. I know that in a lot of cases it needs this sort of work, it lends itself to vector as well.
Yep, so a lot of my client will request vector formats because they are infinitely scalable without loss of quality, so therefore they can use it across multiple purposes. So with my lettering, I prefer my vectors to be very chunky letter forms. So at this stage, I'll use what I've created in Photoshop, print it out, put tracing paper over it, and just redraw it using this structure as a guide. So I'll scan that in and put it into Illustrator, and this is what we have here.
Right, so now you're here in Illustrator with the sort of scan of the bitmap original.
So I've placed it into a template layer, just right there, and that will automatically lock it and put an opacity on it, so we'll be able to vector over it. So in the vectoring stage, I like to use the pen tool.
Yeah, we discussed this before. A lot of people, and I'm sure some of the people viewing, would find the pen tool quite challenging to get to grips with, and indeed in Illustrator we have a lot of other tools that we've added over the years to help. But you insist on the pen tool.
Yeah, I must admit, when I first played around with Illustrator, I just didn't understand it. But once I learnt the principles of type design, I understood why it was there, how to use it, and to get the smoothest curves, I use the pen tools to create two anchor points to create a Bezier curve. That's the name of a curve between two anchor points, and it was created by the French mathematician Pierre Bezier. So I'll talk about the type principle. So if we draw a circle here, I can show you as a guide where to plot your anchor points. So this is a mathematically perfect circle. So where they've plotted the points is in the outermost top, bottom, left and right extremes, and then they've maintained their handles as perpendicular as they can. So we will transpose the same method into our lettering.
So that's key learning. You are saying to maintain, for optimal pen usage,
the smoothest results.
Keep your anchor points or the handles either horizontal or vertical.
Yep. So I'll be
45.
clicking and dragging whilst holding shift
Mm-hmm.
to get those perpendicular points. So I like to start and plot the points first. I can always go back to adjust the curves, but it's completely up to you.
So it begs the question, Caradel asks, do you use image trace in Illustrator to simply trace your scan?
It depends on the purpose. For this, for my clients, say they really wanted a really smooth letter form, I'll always use the pen tool. But if I wanted to convert like a really gritty, highly textured lettering made with a ruling pen, I would absolutely use the image trace, because there's really no need for me to smooth it out when I want to maintain that kind of grittiness.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Caradel, for those questions. And do keep asking the questions. It's a great opportunity to hear from someone who's skilled in both the art and science of Illustrator letterforms, as Melissa.
So I'm just making my way around the letter B here. So I'm not being too particular. Like I said, I like to go back and then fix it. Another tip that I like to talk about is, see this kind of little bump here? That's my handles kind of crossing streams, and that's really not something that you want to do. So you want to avoid that, and that will give you a smoother looking curve.
I also noticed that in the middle of the B there that you didn't make a corner point. You actually made a loop and came back.
Yeah, so this is something I picked up during my time in New York. If we wanted to make adjustments, we would, if it was a single point, I'll just demonstrate it here. If it was a single point like this and we wanted to make an adjustment to that angle and we move this anchor point, we're actually moving two edges. But if we create an overlap like this, we can independently move each edge without affecting the other. So that's really handy. And I also like to outline my lettering stroke by stroke for the same reason, so we can make adjustments in each part without having to adjust the whole thing.
Yes, I see you haven't drawn through around the counters of the B there. You've
That's
kept
correct.
it as two separate lines.
So let me just find the other. Yep. So here, this is what the final vector file would look like. It looks like a hot mess at the moment, but that's because, like I said, we wanted to be able to move these elements independently if we wanted to adjust it. So if we fill it with Shift X, didn't work, ignore that. You can see that all these little overlaps, they're hidden. So it just looks like the entire form, the entire shape.
Do you ever Pathfinder it into one piece of artwork?
Yes. So if I'm giving my final file to my clients, I like to keep the working file for myself and then just use Pathfinder to merge all the shapes so nobody can really go in there and mess with my work. So talking about those perpendicular handles again. So I've got it in outline mode so we can see what we're doing. To show all the handles, we can go up to Illustrator, Preferences, Selection and Anchor Display, and just have this little guy, Show Handles when multiple anchors are selected, turned on. Does not seem to be doing it.
Right, so I can see that all of the anchor points there, their handles are all either vertical or horizontal.
Yeah.
They're not all over the place. Right.
So the more anchor points that you have, the higher chance that something might go awry. So we try to stick to the rules that we used in the mathematically perfect circle. So the anchor points in the outermost extremes and then your handles perpendicular. So, but sometimes you can break those rules if you absolutely need to. As you can see here, this one's kind of not perpendicular, but it was really hard. So we can tend to get away with that.
That's a key learning, and I know that for people who are getting to grips with illustrating the pen tool, I think that will really help them along. Yeah.
So here's the final product that I've vectored.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely. So Photoshop to Illustrator, a lot of the tools. I know you've got some others you're going to work on. For those who've just joined us again, Melissa So, calligrapher, typographer, type designer, graphic designer. Don't forget our competition You have the template from Melissa. You can download that, use some of the brushes, some of the techniques you've seen already from Melissa to work on that. Upload it to Behance using the hashtag APAC Adobe Live, and you've got till next Wednesday to get that to us, and we'll be announcing the winner of that. The prize, of course, is a signed letterpress print.
In teal.
in teal, even better. A signed letterpress print from Melissa, and we'll be awarding that next Wednesday. We'll be announcing the winner of last live stream very soon now, so hang in there. Okay, Melissa, now I see started with paper, moved to the computer. You've now got a tablet in front of you.
Yes, so we'll be exploring how we can use some digital illustrations to really give a bit more graphic texture to our work. So I'll be using what we've created in Illustrator, sync it to my Creative Cloud files, and then that would magically like pop up in my Adobe Sketch.
Okay, so hold you there. So you're using the Creative Cloud files to move your stuff from Illustrator and Desktop into your application here on the iPad. Do you use Creative Cloud a lot for that sort of purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're working from device to device, say from your iMac to your iPad. It's kind of hard to get files onto there, so having it synced from Creative Cloud just solves a lot of hassles.
Right.
And so that's the method I like to use, and it's just so seamless.
So what's the application you're using here?
So today we'll be using Adobe Sketch with my Apple Pencil.
And while we're here, questions again. Thank you, Marie B. What's your favourite colour you use for your lettering?
Well, it's definitely black and white because I love high contrast colours. But recently I've fallen in love with hot pink.
Right, as we can see.
So another high contrast colour.
So,
I love things that pop.
And a question from Janelle. Do you use a Wacom tablet to digitise? If not, why not? Or if you do, why?
Yes. So I prefer to use a Wacom because I was on a mouse, so a lot of my graphic design career, I was just clicking and dragging with a mouse. But then I started to get RSI, so I moved to a Wacom tablet for all my computer work, not just my creative work, and it's completely changed my life. So you've got to look after your body.
So I noticed,
as well.
yes, even you don't use a mouse; you have the keyboard and the
No,
bar
so if you're thinking about plotting anchor points and clicking and dragging, it's like really you're only using an area that small. So this using a pen just allows you greater range of movements.
Right, okay. And was that changed to the Wacom purely as a result of help with the RSI, or does the Wacom add to what you can do?
Oh, you get pressure sensitivity within the Wacom itself has been really helpful. So as with Kyle's brushes, you can press down harder and then you'll get like a pretty immediate response where the ink blob is bigger as well. So that's been a really great benefit.
All right, so I'm interested to see what you do with Adobe Sketch on iPad.
Here with Adobe Sketch, like I mentioned before, I've just imported our previous vectored file into an image layer, and then we'll use this as a base to draw over our texture. So what I'll start with first, I'll just tap on the image layer to bring down the opacity, and then using a contrasting color to draw over. So the benefit of drawing digitally versus, say, doing it on tracing paper is, again, is that we can have the freedom to undo, zoom in, turn it around, because otherwise I'd just be really leaning really close to my paper or like trying to figure out if I really want this mark to be permanent or not.
So it does approach more closely how we first started, which was a brush on paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as you can see, the gestures just make it really easily. Today I'll be drawing the same sort of texture like in the print that we're giving away. So it's kind of, I call it like a dry brush graphic texture. So that comes from studying up close the texture of a brush to paper. Yeah,
that's interesting in that you're not using a dry brush to create the texture. You're actually, as we see here, you're actually drawing the texture. That indicates to me that you must do a lot of study of the results of your art and how it looks.
Yeah, so at this stage it's more lettering, which is the illustration of letters. So like with most illustrators and artists, they have a reference to look. So if I wanted to make it look really furry, I'd study what fur looks like, and I'd use the letters as a guideline, so I can add all these things but still maintain the integrity and the shape of the letters to make it legible.
And how do you find drawing on the iPad, on the glass with the pencil?
Because I'm not trying to get as much texture, I find it really smooth and easy, and it kind of liberates me from being at my desk all day.
Right, so I can see, yes, you're actually physically drawing the roughness in the edges and the loose pieces, yeah.
So you can really, so to undo, you can have a swipe, 2 fingers to the left,
yes,
or to redo, it's just the other way. So you have a lot of these shortcuts as you would on the computer, but just in gestures.
So a question about with these mobile devices, do you use them when you're mobile? Would you take your iPad out?
Oh, absolutely. Before I had an iPad, I'd take like a stack of paper this thick and take all my pens with me and ink, and it's just not that practical, but here I literally just need to bring my pen and my iPad, and then I'll have all my Adobe apps, and then that gives me the freedom to do vectors in Adobe Draw or digitally draw in Adobe Sketch.
And so you will be out in coffee shop or park or something doing your work, right?
I mean, that's a much more attractive environment than like a windowless room. So I'll just go around and do that, and you can really just kind of get lost in it.
There's still a very confident line you have there, so is this something that took a lot of practice to do, or you find that
I've done this style kind of a few times, but sometimes I might want to experiment using the same letter forms as a base but drawing a different texture. So if let's say I wanted to make a drippy sort of looking E, and kind of just imagine what that might look like.
So yes, you're not using a brush that drips, you're actually drawing a drippy character. So
let your imagination go wild. So I'll just close that and show you one that I've done before. The really amazing, one of my favorite features of Adobe Sketch is that it captures all your work. So, and this is great for your portfolio and social. You'll just go to time lapse, and you can play back your work in like a faster speed. So this is a great way of showing people that this is me doing the work. I didn't use a filter or kind of preset to do it. This is just drawing.
Yeah, it's a great resource to see how you've done something as well. We've got a question. Where does your inspiration come from for lettering?
So studying textures, trying to recreate that graphically. Phrases, usually it's just something stuck in my head. Also like pop culture or lyrics. That's where
it's wonderful. And so, as you say, you can put this on your social media so people can see your work. Do you have this on your Behance or your Instagram?
Yeah, so every time I do a mural, I'll do a time lapse of that outside, but if I draw something digitally, I'll post a time lapse of that too. So you can find me on Instagram at Quite So, and on Behance
Quite
as well.
Quite So on Instagram.
Quite, because my name is Melissa, so.
Yes. So you mentioned that a mural. So how do you get from an iPad, 10 inches, to something that's 12 feet high and 45 feet long, like using this for a mural?
Okay, so let's hop back onto our desktop for this. So with a mural, I'd like to go out to the actual site first with just like your phone, capture an image of it, take a measuring tape, and really accurately measure your dimensions, and then note that.
So let me just confirm that. So you will actually go on site to physically experience the place that you.
Yes, I think it's very important to actually be there and to get the spatial awareness and understand the context of where your artwork's going to be. So I like to create mock-ups first for the client. So for me, I understand what it looks like, and also for the client to understand what they will be receiving.
Oh, okay. So you will do this before the job starts, so as part of the brief to the client.
So then you're not invested in, buying paint, laying down any paint, and then having somebody say, oh, that's not really what I was after. This it's kind of like a draft process. Okay. So here I've just used a photo from Adobe Stock. I'll be using smart objects to help with the create a composition. Not a composition, a composite of my artwork onto the mural.
Right.
So with smart objects, sometimes where you're on site, you're not able to get an absolute front-on capture of the wall. You might be constrained by how much room you have, or your lens isn't wide enough, so you might have to get it on a certain angle. So I've used this stock image to kind of illustrate how smart objects can benefit us.
Right, so on the image, you recommend phone's good enough, lighting or any problems? It's really just take the photo.
Just take the photo to get a general idea. I mean, if you're not going to publish it, then it's really just for you. So the way I like to use smart objects is to create a shape using just like a basic rectangle tool. Just draw a rough shape. And then here in the properties palette, I'll input the correct ratio. So say this wall is about 5 meters. I'll put in 500 pixels by, say, 400. So it's 4 meters wide.
So it's not the actual, necessarily the dimension so much as the ratio that you're after.
That's right, because we can always scale our objects larger, so which is what I'm going to do here.
All right. So again, we're here with Melissa. So keep the questions coming. Melissa, I've got one from Rhett who asks,
Hi, Rhett.
Do you tend to draw or use a similar font for most of your projects?
Sometimes if I want to get better at a certain style, I'll do it a couple of times. But if I wanted to try something new, I'll definitely, like, if I discover like a really cool texture that I want to draw, I'll be like, yeah, I'll give that a go. And if it's not looking quite right the first time, I'll just keep doing it until I'm kind of like done with it, and then move on to the next thing. Or you can come back and revisit it and just have that as your part of your arsenal of styles.
So a follow-up question, there's the hand lettering versus hand drawing of a particular type style. Is there a difference between them? And your hand lettering has a certain style to it, but it's not like you're trying to hand draw Garamond, for example. But, is there a mix between those two types of hand drawing?
So with hand lettering, it's more texture focused for me. So I like the unpredictability of what textures that kind of generates. Whereas with drawing letters, I have a lot more control of what that looks like, because I'm not so dependent on my writing tools or the ink.
Right. So the hand lettering is, I think you said, hand lettering is you bring out the texture.
Yeah,
and
characters. It's also, like I said, it's also like an extension of yourself. So a lot of your movements will be translated into your calligraphy.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Let's see
that's
how we...
okay. So back onto smart objects, we've just put in the correct proportions of our wall, and then we've kind of just made it into kind of filling up the size of our...
Again, so you've got on site, you've measured it, but it's not really the measurements, it's the relationship between the knife.
Yes.
Right.
So this is just a rectangle. To convert it into a smart object, we just right-click. It's not coming
Do you
out.
have a favourite mural that you've done?
Probably the break free one, because that was the stippling one.
Yeah, that's a lot of stippling.
There was a little girl who came up to me when I was doing it, and she's like, "Is that your job?" And, and I was like, "Yes." And then she got really excited, and then she asked her mum to like take a photo of her with me and my artwork, and I was just like, "Oh gosh!" And that kind of impact on somebody's life.
You've inspired another.
Yeah, and it's like she was like a little girl, and it was just like so heartwarming.
That's how it happens.
So it's not really the work itself, but the experience that it gave me was really good. So right-click, convert to smart object. And then at this stage, we have our move tool, and we just hold command to be able to correct
It's a cool tip.
the perspective.
Command on the Mac and Control on the PC.
Yep.
And you can free distort your smart object.
So there we have our smart object. So we just double-click into it, and that will open up the correct ratio again, which we can put our artwork into. So this is the lettering that I created previously on the Adobe Sketch, and I'll just drag it into this smart object layer.
And you got it from Sketch back into Photoshop Desktop through how?
The Creative Cloud assets.
Right.
Yeah.
Back through libraries again.
Yeah.
Cloud.
Yeah.
Terrific.
So you can really move from like app to app, device to device quite seamlessly and easily, and it just works really well together. Okay. So here I've just centered it, hit save, and that will automatically update in the correct perspective of our mockup.
That's quite different. And a lot of people, myself included, would have been tempted just to drag that image directly on it or place it, whereas you drew a rectangle container first.
Yeah, so I remember a time before smart objects, and that's exactly the way we used to do it.
Yeah.
But then if we wanted to change something, we would have to do that process over and over again because we would work destructively, but smart objects allows you to work non-destructively and maintain the integrity of your original file, which is something I've obviously throughout my whole process I try to do.
Yes, I like that idea of drawing the container first. So we've got a question here from Gillian. Which technique do you find is the useful shortcut when creating murals, especially with large-scale murals and tight deadlines?
Oh, shortcut? I don't know if there are any shortcuts, but definitely at this mock-up stage, it really helps you position your artwork before laying down any drop of paint and really gives you spatial context to see whether it works or not. So if I wanted to make a change, if I'm like, oh, I wanted this to be a bit bigger and have a bit more impact, I can go back into the smart object and say, kind of want it to bleed off the edge or tilt it, make it look a bit more dynamic, hit save, and that will automatically update without me having to, skew everything and mask off all the places. Once again, we can use our gradient map adjustment layer to color it.
Gradient adjustment layer tip.
As you can see, it's one of my favorite tools. Let's do a teal again. See, it's not kind of working for me. It's too light, so I might want to quickly make an adjustment.
It was just a recommendation.
To a hot pink.
Try to have the hot pink.
Love the hot pink. So save that. And as you can see, we can already tell that with a few minor adjustments, we can already make these changes without having to commit.
So again, we sort of alluded to this, but a question way back at the beginning is, that's terrific. You've gone from drawing it on paper, Illustrator on the Mac, onto the iPad, and now mocked it up. But how do you get it from here to the final wall?
So that really depends on the environment that your mural wall is located. There's kind of a few ways that you can do it. You can make a big stencil. That's a really like an old signwriters technique. So that's where I talked about having a carbon transfer where you have either carbon or graphite on the back of it, and then you go over it with like a firm pressure pen just to transfer that graphite to the actual wall. So when you peel away the stencil, you're left with an outline which you can then fill in. Another way is if you're inside and you have a power source, you can use a projector, but that gets a little, you have to kind of play with the perspective. You have to, especially with lettering, if like it's off at a really weird angle, it can distort your letters. And then the final way is just to freehand it. And if you're really amazing, you can just treat the wall as like a really big canvas.
That's confidence in line work.
You really have to have a lot of experience to do that.
Yeah. And then the other way, delivering this type of artwork to your customer, how do you deliver it as a digital file, or when they're using it for other purposes? Tactically, do you save it as an EPS or a PDF and send it to them? Or
I find a lot of my clients don't understand what an EPS is when it comes to a vector file. Sorry, it's true. So I save the vector files as a PDF and then send it on, and then the printers and whoever needs would understand what to do with it. For murals, the actual deliverable would be the wall itself, but then for myself, for my own documentation and for the client, I like to have a camera on site with me where I take a time lapse of every stage and also just get some photos of the process, because I find that a lot of people are quite interested to see how it comes together and what the behind the scenes look like.
Very much so. Melissa, we're coming up to the top of the hour. That has been truly enlightening, and to see you go from drawing on paper, using the breadth of tools that you do use, the Illustrator and Photoshop. There's quite a lot of Photoshop use, more so than I would have expected. Techniques and tips and techniques I've learnt there from you, and to see you do that work on Adobe Sketch on the iPad, you really do use a lot of different tools.
Yeah.
Is that something you often seek out, or are you interested in new tools?
I tend to seek out what suits me. So if I need to figure out something, I'll usually go online and see if I can find a tutorial, or if I can find an app that would, make the process easier.
So we've got a question from Andrew here. Thank you, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Your thoughts on Comic Sans, yay or nay?
You know what? I say yay, because it's so easy for people to make fun of Comic Sans, but when it was originally designed, it was designed to be friendly, but it's the end user who really misuses it. So you don't send out like an invitation to a funeral in Comic Sans. That's a human error. That's not the typeface, so don't blame the typeface.
Right, don't blame Comic Sans for all the badness that's been thrust upon it.
Typefaces take a long time to make. There's a lot of design, spacing. You have to make, you're designing like the characters themselves and also the spaces in between them. So it takes a long time. So don't be nice to your type designers. They're probably like really tired. I
can only imagine. So I'm going to hold one last question for you, but we're at the top of the hour coming up there now. Just to recap, we've been here with Melissa, so learning great things about calligraphy, typography. Don't forget the competition. Melissa's provided the template. She recommends, again, downloading it, printing it, tracing over the top of it.
Have fun. Show me what you can do. Experiment.
Doesn't have to be in hot pink.
No, it doesn't have to be. It can be whatever colour you want.
As long as it's teal or hot pink. Take that work that you've done and upload it to Behance using the hashtag Adobe APAC Live. The reason you're doing that is for the chance to win a signed print from Melissa in teal, letterpress print that you can see there on screen. And we'll be announcing the winner of that next live stream. It's come to the time to announce the winner of last live stream, which was from the live stream we did with Jeremy Lord. And we have the winner there, who happens to be Diane from New Zealand. There's the artwork behind us on screen. Quite different to what you've been doing, but
it's really cool.
This is the sort of work that was done in our last live stream. So Diane, thank you very much, and thank you to everybody else who entered. We can only give the one prize. So, a couple of questions. What's your favourite typeface?
Oh, that's a hard one.
You design typefaces.
I know, that's why it's so hard. Really, I didn't anticipate this question.
They're all live.
No. Okay, let's say Garamond. It's
Garamond.
It's like classic. It's just got really nice serif. So, and it's beautiful. It's classic. I love it.
So at heart, you're a classicist.
Yes.
You'd go with Garamond. Okay, no, that's terrific.
Wait, would it be controversial if I said Comic Sans?
Yeah. Well, horses for courses. You can't blame Comic Sans, as we've learned. A couple of minutes for a couple of questions. I'll get them into your chat pod. But what I wanted to ask you was sort of wrapping all this up.
Yeah.
An expert tip, either product or technology based, or even lifestyle based.
Yeah.
What would you give to all of our viewers as your parting comment as an expert?
I would recommend everybody to follow their curiosities and really indulge in your interests, and really as many of them as you can, because through doing that, you'll gain experiences that will really resonate with you, and you'll find what really works for you creatively, and that will only help to strengthen your own style.
Melissa, it's been fantastic. As someone who has loved type, personally it's been an eye-opener, and I've really enjoyed being here with you.
Thank you.
To everybody, don't forget, enter in the competition, if for no other reason than to win that wonderful prize of the lithographic letterpress print from Melissa. Melissa, one last call out, your Instagram.
Yep, it's Quite So.
And on Behance.
Quite So.
There you go, so Quite So. Melissa, so thank you very much. It's been an absolute joy to have you here
It's
today.
been so much fun to be here.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you on our next APAC live stream. Thank you.
Thanks.